I've got Matthew Dickerson on the line. How are you this week, Matthew?
I'm fantastic. Thanks. Always good to be chatting about technology. Always gives me a bit of a buzz chatting about technology, Chris.
I'm with you. I like it too. Now, we've spoken about this topic off air before because my old mountain bike, I used to run over these cat heads that are literally everywhere up here in Burke, and I'd get these flat tyres. Ended up giving that bike away, mind you. But there's some new technology out that can puncture-proof your bike.
Yeah, you might have to get that bike back, Chris. If you go away for too many punches, then maybe it's time to get it back. But I remember when I was a kid, I used to love my BMX bike when I was a kid and used to race BMX, and there'd be some kid that would always turn up somewhere and he'd say, I've got tyres that don't get punches. And we'd go, that sounds fantastic, because you'd always be a long way from home when you get a puncture. And then you'd get that bike and it was so heavy because you'd have these thick, solid rubber tyres, so they never really took off. But when you go back to NASA, which is not the most obvious place you go to for puncture-proof tyres, but they produce the rovers they send off to places, like Mars. And I don't know there's too many puncture repair shops on the surface of Mars, so they've got to produce tyres that can do everything a tyre needs to be able to do without getting a puncture. And so they've got these fantastic tyres, and they've actually got a metal inside the tyre, and it acts like a normal tyre. It deforms over rocks and bumps and all the rest of it like a normal tyre, but it doesn't get a puncture because there's no air in there to actually get a puncture. So a company at the moment is now making bicycle tyres with the same technology that the Rover has got. And the metal they use in there is a combination metal. It's a nickel and a titanium they put together. It's basically designed to be as light as possible, keep the springiness of it because you want it to be able to deform as it goes over things, but not like a steel, for example, that would eventually fatigue and then collapse. You wanted to keep that springiness about it and basically not have to worry about air in there. So it's actually quite a clever concept. The material they've produced is called a nitinol, and I think that's a combination of nickel and titanium. But basically they're designed to stay up all the time, not be too heavy, and the only thing I haven't been able to find out yet is the price of these. When you start combining nickel and titanium and using NASA technology, I can't imagine they're cheap, but you know what price all those punches and frustrations on the side of the road.
So they're guaranteeing them for up to 5,000 miles, and they'll be released in 2022, Matthew.
Yeah, so 5,000 miles, that's a lot of bike riding to do. So if they guarantee it for that length of time, that sounds pretty impressive. Obviously, they've still got a normal rubber surface around the outside, so that will still wear out. But what's inside, I can imagine, will never wear out.
Have you checked your mobile for Fleeceware apps? They may be costing you hundreds of dollars.
Fleeceware, some of the terms we have to come up with to look at our modern society, Chris. Fleeceware is, as the name suggests, you are being fleeced of some of your money through apps that really aren't meant, or they're not really doing what they say they'll do. And unfortunately, Australia is a world leader. We've downloaded 10 million Fleeceware apps. It's cost the country so far $9.9 million. So we are the #1 downloader of these apps in the Apple App Store and the Google Play Store. So what they do is they do actually charge you money. Now, there are apps out there that do charge you money, so you think, well, what's the big deal with that? But what they do is they sneakily, secretly, or dishonestly charge you money. So you might install an app, it might say it's $2 to install that app, or it might have a small monthly or weekly fee. But what they do is, without you really knowing about it, you'll click on various things and you'll get extra charges. And you don't really know about that until you look at your credit card statement or your bank statement, and suddenly you see a lot more money has gone out than you thought should have been. The #1, and I'm sure you haven't got this app installed, Chris, the #1 app in this Fleeceware range is one called Fortune Scope. It's a live palm reader and fortune teller. Now, maybe that fortune teller should say don't download Fleeceware apps, I'm not sure. But people are being charged as much as $3,500 a year to use that particular app. There's a dating app, for example, called Flame. They say that the annual fee is $119.99, so they disclose that amount. But what they actually charge you is $780. So there's a range of apps like that that are just sneakily charging you extra money. I suppose the advice here, Chris, is make sure you check the apps, check the terms and conditions, and keep a bit of an eye on your bank statement to see what charges are going through. You might be able to get some of that money back from your bank if you've got a friendly bank. You might not, but at least you can stop it if you see those amounts coming out of your bank statement.
Well, that makes me feel okay when I think about all of the extra fleeceware I've forked out for a game called Roblox. My son loves that game. You heard of Roblox?
I have heard of Roblox, yeah.
Yeah, the
And you're
kids love
blaming your son for this, are you, Chris?
it. He's had a few extras that I've had to pay for. But that's okay. Moving on, mate. Movie scenes that show a photo magically enhanced when an IT expert clicks on a button are just fictional, right?
Well, I would have said yes, Chris. I would have said definitely. Those CSI scenes where there's a number plate, there's just a blurry image off in the distance, and someone walks in the room with thick glasses and a bunch of pens in their top pocket, and they click the enhance button, and suddenly you can see that number plate perfectly. All movie stuff, and movies don't always tell the truth. But Photoshop has released a new feature called Super Resolution, and it will quadruple the resolution of your photos without basically removing the quality of it, which sounds pretty impressive. And it uses some pretty clever AI that does look at everything that's on the photo and then tries to just basically, rather than make each pixel bigger, it tries to fill in the bits between pixels in making it bigger. So normally when you blow up a photo, it just takes every pixel, makes it larger, so it doesn't sharpen the image. But because our AI is getting so good now, and because our AI is so powerful, or computers are so powerful, then you're able to actually try and get this AI to fill in all the bits in between the dots, and so you keep that resolution, you keep that quality. It takes a fair bit of processing power, and even after you looked at a preview, which I've looked at some previews, and I thought, wow, it's pretty impressive in what it can do. When you say, yes, change that whole photo, you want to sit back and get a cup of coffee before it does it, because it does take a fair bit of number crunching to do it. But yeah, those scenes in the movies, maybe one day we'll be able to get to the stage where it does do that magic enhancement, fills in all those dots perfectly.
We're talking technology with Matthew Dickerson. Now, we are familiar with the work of Spot the Robot Dog from Boston Dynamics. Now meet Stretch, a new robot from Boston Dynamics.
They're getting a great reputation around the world, Boston Dynamics, for some of their innovative robotics they're building.
Right.
So Spot was great. He walked around, did things, goes and helps the police, does a whole range of things. Stretch is a bit different to Spot in that Stretch looks a bit boring. Stretch has just got a big block on the ground and a big arm and an eye on top. Oh. But what they're doing with Stretch is they're talking to companies that have got warehousing to say, forget about installing all the rails and all the infrastructure that you would normally put in a warehouse. And I've seen warehouses like this where various robots move along these rails, they go up and down certain things on the actual trays where all the stock is stored, but it's fairly hard to put all that in place. Whereas what Stretch can do is move around independently, can go and find things on shelves, pick them up. He can pick up 23 kilos. It's got a suction on the end of his long arm. The long arm is where the name Stretch comes from. So essentially, you can put Stretch into your warehouse without putting all the infrastructure in, and he can be put straight at work immediately. The speed that they're talking about with Stretch is about the same as a human, and you kind of go, well, what's the point then? Well, the point with Stretch is that he doesn't need to eat, doesn't need to go and sleep or have a lunch break. He can just keep working through. The battery will last about 8 hours, so about one shift, but you can replace the battery and swap it over and then keep going. So basically, he can be working like a human 24 hours a day, and he's not going to cost you the wage that he might pay for a human. So any warehouse workers out there, maybe start looking around and start to become robotics builders or computer operators. I'm not sure what else you might want to do, but certainly I think we'll see more and more of this automation in warehousing.
Now, we have a global shortage of computer chips. What is the one item where we will see the most delays, Matthew?
They're calling this Chipageddon, Chris. Chipageddon. Who comes up with these names? But we obviously would see some delays in things like TVs and gaming consoles, even some smartphones at the moment, a little bit hard to get hold of. But the biggest area we're seeing delays is with motor vehicles. And it's not the most obvious thing you'd think of. I can't get a computer chip, so I can't buy a new car. That just doesn't seem to make sense. But that's exactly what's happening. And you think about a modern car, the engine is probably the first place people think of with our electronic fuel injection now. It's not a good old-fashioned carby where you open up the float valve and away it goes. Air comes in and everything works mechanically. It's all controlled electronically now. But then think about the rest of the car. Think about your entertainment system. Think about your cruise control. Think about your radar controls on it for emergency braking, your lane assist. There are an incredible number of computer chips used on a car, and you can have a car completely manufactured just waiting for the chips, and that's what some of the manufacturers are finding at the moment. But you could be waiting 6 months for a car. The car's built. The car's ready to go. It just needs some of these chips on it to actually make it all work. Some of the car manufacturers are putting some big numbers and big time frames on some of this. And so you're talking about, say, for example, Volkswagen. They've told 10,000 of their factory workers to go home and basically take it easy for a while because there's nothing for you to do. Ships have been cancelled at Ford in the US, and Ford's estimating $2.5 billion of cost for this. Nissan's killing output. General Motors are saying $2 billion profit is going to be hit. So there's some pretty big numbers there. You would have thought it would have been pretty easy to go on and order a new car, but at the moment it's actually quite difficult.
All right, Matthew, well, we'll leave it there. Of course, you can join Matthew on YouTube. Just search Matthew Dickerson. Have a good week, mate. We'll talk again next Wednesday.
Great. Thanks, Chris. We'll chat next week.